I'm Mo Rocca, and I'm excited to announce Season 4 of my podcast, Mobituaries. I've got a whole new bunch of stories to share with you about the most fascinating people and things who are no longer with us. From famous figures who died on the very same day, to the things I wish would die, like buffets. All that and much more. Listen to Mobituaries with Mo Rocca wherever you get your podcasts.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, now streaming only on Netflix.
Barenaked, 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 ABCs. Before we get going with tonight's episode, I do want to let you know that there are going to be spoilers throughout this episode. We do talk a lot about the Barenaked Ladies pilot for Fox, which you will hear more about. I have linked that in this week's show notes. It is a Vimeo link. Go out there, watch it. We'll also be referring it to next week's episode as well. So take the time before you listen to this episode to go out and watch it so you have an understanding of kind of what we're referring to throughout the episode and we don't ruin anything for you. That being said, please enjoy tonight's interview.
Welcome to the Barenaked ABCs, and joining us tonight is a gentleman who has been all over Hollywood. He has been the sole director for the Ringo Starr and All-Star Band concerts for over 15 years, as well as directing the specials for them. He worked on the Jay Leno's first cable special ever. He was producer for the Larry Sanders Show. He has been nominated for a Grammy and an Emmy with Robert Altman for their Jazz 32 feature. He just recently finished working on the new season of Mad About You. He edited episodes of Young and Hungry, 2 years of Crash and Bernstein, True Jackson, VP, Greg the Bunny, Caroline in the City, Whose Line Is It Anyway, Dave's World, and the pilot for Ben Stiller's show. He has edited stand-up specials for Kathy Griffin, Kevin Nealon, Caroline Ray, Paula Poundstone, Joan Rivers, Harry Anderson, Roseanne Barr, Sam Kinison, Stephen Wright, Martin Short, Billy Crystal, Rodney Dangerfield. He has directed episodes of Crash and Bernstein, Oliver Bean, Greg the Bunny, Caroline in the City, Dion and Friends, where Dionne Warwick interviews celebrities, as well as directing music videos for Ringo Starr, Aerosmith, Ozzy Osbourne, Emmylou Harris, Neil Young, and Cletus T. Judd. You may think I've just been sitting here listing his IMDb page, but this is only a short amount of the work he has done. If there is a man who knows funny on TV, this is the guy. If there is a man who knows music on TV, this is the guy. Oh yeah, and I didn't say he has also co-directed and edited the one and only pilot for the Barenaked Ladies TV show for Fox.
That's right. Barenaked Ladies had a pilot for Fox.
It is my pleasure to be interviewing tonight Mr. Brent Carpenter. Brent, thank you for joining us.
You make it sound like I've actually done something.
You have done a lot. I guess flabbergasted.
So. Yeah, I'm a little gasted myself.
I didn't even list Empty Nest on there. Like, that's another one. Like, these are like shows that I grew up watching and enjoying. So this is wonderful.
A real quick funny thing about Empty Nest, that the show you saw was not an empty nest. If you remember, the girls lived at home. The original pilot, nothing like that. The original pilot was Rita Moreno and Paul Dooley. They spun it off of Golden Girls, and their kids had just moved out, and they sold the name, and then they said, we don't really like that show. So they came up with a whole different show and kept the name.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, it always threw me because, like, it's not an empty nest. But how about them naked ladies, huh?
Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of ladies, yeah, we can jump right into that. But actually, why don't we come back to it? I want to know, before we can get going, what brought you into this line of work?
really by chance. I wanted to, I was big in music, obviously, and I wanted to be a recording engineer. And I was in Phoenix at the time. I grew up in Phoenix. And there was no such thing in those days, because I'm a little bit older, as a college program for recording engineers. So there was a PBS station on campus. They took volunteers. And my first semester, they basically taught us how to run the station so they could run it for free. And I figured, I was helping seniors finish their projects. And I thought there might not be a lot left to learn at school here. And I ended up going to, a friend took me into the CBS News affiliate as an editor. That was the entry-level position then, news editor, and it paid $1.90 an hour. We were happy to get it. As I went a little further in news, things started to change. I was back in, dare I say, Walter Cronkite was still with us, and news was a little more real, and it slowly became more entertainment, and I lost interest in it, and saw the music videos thing happening with MTV, and wanted to get into that. So I learned that type of editing while I was doing news, and ended up moving to Sacramento. And the gentleman who did, I don't know if you know Michael Nesmith's Elephant Parts video album.
Yes.
First video album ever made. The gentleman who made it, we met, and he said, "You got to come to LA if you want to make music videos." And I don't really want to go to LA. And he talked me into it, and it worked out.
Wow.
That actually might be the long version.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because this Barenaked Ladies pilot that you guys shot reminds me a lot of the Monkees, especially the original Monkees. So it's really interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah,
very much so. And when I read the script for it, that was the first thing I thought was, definitely the strangeness of the Monkees in there, although a little stranger still. The two writers, Jeff Schaefer and Alec Berg, had come off of a huge success on Seinfeld. They were writers and I think co-exec producers on that. And I'm not sure both of them went on to work with Larry David on Curb, but I know that Alec did. Alec, I think he's currently doing Silicon Valley, I want to say.
Oh, wow.
And there was three of them. I don't remember the third guy. They were writing team. And Jeff was on Curb Your Enthusiasm. He still is. He also did, I think, The League and a couple other things. They were both brilliant writers, and part of their deal on that show was that they got to direct also, but they'd never directed before, and the producers said, you're gonna have to kind of take over. I think I might have I just did Greg the Bunny or something like that, something weird. And of course, because of their connections with Seinfeld and all, they ended up getting Michael Richards in, and George Takei. I don't know how that came in. He was just wonderful. He was everything you would hope. Sitting and taking pictures with people and autographs, and it was just a blast.
Yeah, no, I mean, talk about a major cameos throughout that show. Like a whole bunch of them right there for a pilot is amazing. Like you don't get that normally.
Yeah, and okay, you can help me out because you remember his name, Harlan
Williams.
Harlan is related to Jim, I think, or Kevin.
Kevin, his cousin.
Right. Yeah, we found that out I don't even know if the other guys knew that at the time. I'm sure they did. But, yeah, Harlan was hilarious, and we did all the weird stuff on the bus, and he ad-libbed a lot. It was not totally scripted. It was not quite a Curb where they just went off an outline, but they weren't actors. If the lines were close, yeah, it's good enough.
Yeah, I don't think Ed is not an actor. It's funny because he does end up having his own TV show later, and he's very charismatic, but I think the writers veered too far from his personality with that show for him to feel comfortable with his acting. He just comes across a little off.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of, there were a lot of weird, crazy little things. Personally, I wanted to see the sitcom with George Takei and the black woman. I don't remember her name, but I wanted to see that whole series go because.
That would have been hilarious.
Yeah, that was very amusing. The other thing that was a little bit of a cameo, and I don't remember her name at all, but the gorgeous assistant to their manager, that was at the time was Sylvester Stallone's girlfriend.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, because of course all the guys were, we got to hit on that. And so he said, yeah, don't bother. Listen to that sly money. You can just go on home.
Now, do you remember the premise for this show? Like, was there a premise that was written for this show? Like,
no, I don't think that. They took forever to figure out how to open it. That bit with the goats and things was like the last of 10 attempts they made on nobody could figure out how to start the show for some reason.
Well, I like how they're starting it with the music. Like that's a great little catch, like little grab there.
Yeah, and the other thing that it was funny that happened, that everybody always thinks someone's taking care of it. When we shot the concert pieces in between, it's now called the Avalon in Hollywood. It was the Palace, and they had put out, or were supposed to have put out word through their fan clubs stuff to people, come on down. We're going to do the shoot, and they'll play a few songs and stuff. And I can't remember what happened. It's somebody at the record label messed up, whatever. But we had about 100 people there was all that showed up. And
wow.
They'll hold 4,000 or 5,000 in this place. So everybody up front on the stage, everybody close, everybody. We had a crowd around. And this weirdest part was I was sitting by the monitors waiting for, and this guy, long, wild hair, and hollering at me. He'd say, "Hey, Brent." And I look at him. He goes, "Mike." I look like I have no idea who this guy is. He's Mike, your mailman. Well, he always had his hair tied back, kind of hidden under his hat and all. But he's a massive Barenaked Ladies fan, and it was like, oh, hey, that's really cool. I had no idea.
Go ahead.
Also point out all the stuff, all the concert stuff that you saw was recorded live. They didn't pre-record anything for the concert. They just banged it out because they're just that good.
Well, yeah, that's what they're good at. Like, let's just ad-lib. Like, we can go out there and kind of just do what, like, we might have something pre-written, but we're going to mess around a little bit and have fun and give it our best. And they just do wonderful at that. Yeah,
and that's always one thing that bothers me about any shows when they have real musicians and they pre-record. When I first saw, what was it, Glee on Fox, I thought, oh, that's choir, that'll be great. And then it's all pre-recorded crap. I'm like, oh, come on, these people can sing, just let them sing. But I guess it saves money. But the ladies, they would not do that. They would come up with stuff on the spot. They would record things right away. They would actually, another one of my favorite parts was in that spooky, weird clock thing with Michael Richards, trying to figure out, needed some music to make it a little more ominous. And Jim had come by while we were editing, he was gone, and we edited over Fox. And the one producer said, it'd be really cool. It's like just like a little, a little bass thing, like dum 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 dum. Jim goes, oh, well, hang on, I got the bass in the car. He really had a stand-up bass out there. He ran out, brought it into the edit suite. We put a microphone in front of him, played at the scene, and he did it twice, I think. And he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Yeah, that's great." And off he went. So
wow,
it's the kind of show I love doing because it was that quick and that collaborative, and everybody was throwing things in, and it was really a lot of fun.
It sounds like it would have been amazing had Fox ever picked it up. Is there any idea why Fox decided not to pick it up? Like, did they ever, like, I'm guessing probably not. They're probably like, nope, no good, no thank you. But, like,
yeah,
were there hints?
It was a little too, I think it was a little too soon because it was also right after Greg the Bunny, and Comedy Central had not really come into its own yet. And the other, like FX and FXX, all those perfect places for it, but they didn't exist yet. So I think it was a little too out there for the mainstream network. They had a real big tank on Greg the Bunny, although we loved it.
Well, and it would have fit, like, if it had been following up Greg the Bunny, it would have been a great follow-up. Like, it's just that nice absurdist type humor that's just a little bit on the edge there that they pull back every now and then. But
yeah. And I know you asked in an email, you asked the question about the end of the show. I don't know what happened. I thought I had the entire show. Obviously, something happened in the transfer. It was done all the way to the end. And unfortunately, the ending was really fun. They had a big fight in the Chinese restaurant. And as they were fighting, the angry father does a flying kick. He's on wires. He comes screaming at them. And then something happens and he gets stuck. And he's just hanging there as the guys walk by him and push him, and he swings around in a circle. And it was a great ending. And I don't know what happened to it. Someday maybe I'll be able to find it somewhere. But
if you ever do, I would love to see that. That sounds great.
Yeah, it was the Chinese restaurant. I don't know if it's even there anymore. It was at the Universal Studios, but it had closed about a year before we got there, so it was a little funky inside. It was a little strange.
Well, that was a really different scene. Like, that was the one scene where I was like, where did that was the most Monkees-esque moment to me out of the whole thing. Was like, we have this complete left turn out of nowhere, into this completely different direction for the show that you would never have guessed from the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, and the guys, to their credit, they did have to play that song. They didn't do that one live, but they did play it on the I'm going to say it must have been is it Japanese or Chinese? Well, it was a Chinese restaurant, but I think it was the Japanese song. Japanese.
It's it looks like it's Japanese.
Yeah. But they did learn to play them enough to get through that song and do a pre-record of those really weird instruments. So those boys are really versatile, I got to tell you.
That's pretty impressive. Like those are some, like I can't imagine the chords are all the same and that the strings are all the same.
Yeah, it's got to be a whole different thing. So they were very clever on that stuff.
So did the band approach them, or did Fox approach the band? Like, how did this come about?
Unfortunately, that part I don't really know. I'm gonna guess that probably band and management had an idea and talked to Fox. I don't remember Jeff and Alex saying that they were huge Barenaked Ladies fans and they always thought this the show they really loved them once they got there, but I don't know what the connection was before that. I was brought in a little bit later, unfortunately.
It'd be interesting to know because I think the writers got the idea of B&L pretty well, and like there's a couple of things like Ed is totally not a ladies' man in any way, shape, or form. Like I know they were kind of like, here's our cookie cutter type people that we want to have in these different spots,
right?
But it's interesting because almost all the rest of the band kind of fits with this persona that they normally put out there for their audience. From interviews, what seems to be pretty accurate as well. The only one that doesn't is Ed, like this whole womanizer type persona, and you can tell he's putting it on. Whenever he's not doing that one role of being the womanizer, he just gets really comfortable again, but it's that one role where he just seems to be like overdoing it.
Yeah, and Kevin, God bless him, he was not comfortable acting, and I think that shows, but for who he's supposed to be, it was definitely him. He was he really worked hard to get the things right.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, they all did. It was a lot of fun. I think they had a good time, and especially with Harlan there, that made them very comfortable. And it was just one of those weird times where as you're making it, you're going, this is just bizarre.
Well, the whole Michael Richards scene is extremely bizarre. Like that takes it to another level.
Yeah, because that was one of the thoughts. Normally you stop time, you come back and you jump cut or something to make it look like. And they said, no, it's got to be. They can't tell anything is happening. Okay, all right.
You don't know whether he did stop time or he didn't.
Is he just nuts?
It's just great because it really sets them up to look like they're going slowly insane.
Yeah, and they may have been.
And I love the whole Tyler when he leaves the bus, the bathroom scene, how that was all staged. So were you directing at that point, like deciding like how people would be set up, where the shots would be kind of be taking place and things like that at that point?
The whole thing was very collaborative. I concentrated more on the cameras getting the shots where they should be. But the thing that happened with that was that, again, it's got that towards the end, they got that full-on choir singing Privacy. Well, that was all the guys. They recorded that in a little room on the side of the stage, just ran in with their laptop and threw layers on layers. And so when they got to do it, they had just hired extras. They were not choir singers or anything, just a bunch of black extras, and they were really reserved, and it wasn't what Jeff and Alec were looking for. And it kept we were huddling this, it's got, and I knew exactly what they were trying to say. And finally I just, from the video village back there, I just hollered. I said, "You got to be more black." And they all, and everybody on our side, all the white folk went, "Oh, no." They went, "Oh, okay, we get it." They want, you want the Southern Baptist Choir, and the next shot was perfect, and they did exactly. It's like, come on, let's be honest. This is what we're doing.
Well, I love how they go from on the bus to all of a sudden behind Tyler like that. It brings us to a whole other level.
Yeah, they're just popping around wherever they need to be. Yeah, any semblance of reality has been thrown out the window. I think once you get past goat wrestling at the beginning, it's pretty much a free for all.
Oh yeah. Now goat wrestling at the beginning, I don't remember that scene.
Did they not? I thought
that might be the other part of the footage that's missing because I don't remember. I could be wrong. I've watched it three or four times though.
It was well, unless I've got the wrong version. They originally, yeah, you're right. It got cut off, at least on the one I have. They started off with them, something about the announcer saying, the Barenaked Ladies are going to wrestle goats in their underwear. And said, well, not wrestle goats. Well, they're going to do this. And it was all these weird things, but they had this pen of goats in front of them standing there. We shot so many things to get this. I did, as you mentioned, I did this pilot for the Ben Stiller show, and it was the same thing. We probably shot 5 versions of the wraparounds before Fox said okay. That the sketches were always locked, but getting to it, and it was the same with the beginning. They just couldn't figure out how to open the show. So yeah, you're right. Goat wrestling. I don't think that. I was going to say I don't think I made it to air, but none of it made it to air.
Right. But if that ever shows up, I'd love to see that too. Like the script is really sound. Like it really kind of works. I mean, it definitely is dated. The Ed jokes toward the women would, in today's Me Too society, would probably, and Tyler's statements of in today's Me Too society would not go so well. But this was 2002. Like it's a different time.
It is. It's hard to believe that was almost 20 years ago now.
Exactly. What was your favorite character on this show?
I loved Kevin and his weird relationship with his keyboard. It almost seemed like it might have been real. He got into that and was caressing and got along really, really well. It may have been a little too close for comfort.
Now, is that a prop or was that his actual keyboard?
No, that was a prop. And I don't think it worked at all because he would just turn knobs and touch stuff. And I don't think anything ever actually happened with that. Yeah, it was just a prop.
Now, it's interesting because he actually, in a later album, does a callback to that.
Is that right?
Which no one ever understands because we never saw this pilot. But in Snack Time, he actually writes a song called Snack Time where he has all these people come in and talk about their favorite snack. And he finally, and all the kids do one as well. All the band's kids members come in and say their favorite snack. And since his daughter wasn't able to do it, or at least is my theory, since his daughter was not able to do it, he has a robot character called Zignon 5 come in and say that he likes microchips.
Hello, I am Zignon 5, and I like microchips.
That's funny.
And up until now, we're all like, what is this Zignon 5? Like, I look it up on the internet. I can't find anything about it. I now know where Zignon 5 comes from.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that was nice was, having to sit with the guys for so long and all. I did get to coerce them into saying, what is the deal with the Birchmont home of the Robbie? And they that whole thing. Because that's, these questions are things you need to have answered.
Exactly. Who was the funniest member of the cast off camera?
Yeah, they were all pretty good. Tyler, I think maybe Tyler was the wackiest.
I could see that.
I said, it's been a little while, so it's hard to remember. Everybody was nuts on this, I think is the whole.
Do you have any more stories that you would like to tell about this experience, which is wonderful? And I'm going to post the link because I really want people to go out there and watch this. It really is a great piece of BNL history. I hope this never comes down because I like to keep going back to it occasionally and rewatching it. And it's a part of the history that I wish had happened.
Now that you're drawing attention to it, they'll want to take it down.
Fox, whoever, don't you dare take it down. We will riot. Are there any more big stories that you remember from this experience?
No, nothing. I mean, it was all an experience, that's for sure. But the bus that you see from the outside when they had to ride in to do things was horrible. It was just like folding chairs inside. There was nothing inside it. Why they had to have that bus and then the nice bus for the actual inside shots, I never quite figured that out. That was one of those that like, can't we just use the nice bus for everything? But
they're like, no, it doesn't fit with the band image that we're going for here.
Yeah, and the moving shot where Harlan gets up when he's supposed to be driving was actually shot on the road, but there was another driver behind the curtain. But
I'm glad to hear that.
We could green screen and do. I said, why don't we just drive it? Just get it over with. Oh, well, okay, yeah, we can do that.
We just pull the curtain over a little bit so no one can see the person.
Didn't be that tough. So yeah, it was a wild time, and We'd do it all again if they give us the money.
Now, was it written in the script for Kevin to start playing the exit music on the bus when they switched for Harlan to go back to the seat?
Yes.
Or did he just okay?
Yeah, all the music cues, although they were played live, they were all planned out, like Women's Pants. One of my favorite songs of theirs, of course.
I have now stripped that off the video so that way I can listen to it on my iPod because that is hilarious.
It really was good, yeah. But yeah, they and that was the other thing. Again, playing it live was the producers in the background. We can pre-record and we'll get to speak. Just they're musicians. Have them play it. It's not that hard. They are professionals. They get paid for this.
Oh yeah, the only thing that's not going to go is like if the microphone's not in the right place, it might not carry. But other than that, they're going to make it sound wonderful. Exactly.
Yeah, that was that's one of the things I always love about working with musicians. Can't get the words out. It's just, hey, can we do a little thing like, oh, you mean like this? And they'll play it, and you go, yeah, that's exactly what I meant.
Now, the sign that was at the Staples Center, the Barenaked Ladies sign, was that actually up on the Staples Center sign itself, or was that like CGI'd in later?
Yeah, sadly, no, it was a CGI. It would have been fun to see that down there, but no, they had to create that later.
I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah, I think everybody driving by on the freeway would have too.
I'm gonna segue away from the Barenaked Ladies script and TV show for now, unless more ones pop into my head. I want to know more about you and the work that you do. Like, which is a bigger thrill for you, or if they're kind of the same, like different for you, being a director or an editor?
Actually, the biggest thrill is being both, because then you have complete control over everything that's going on. And it's the first time I did that was, I think, on Caroline. It was some show. A friend of mine was the executive producer, and he said, "But if you're the director and the editor, and you tell me something's not there, I won't know if it is or it isn't." I said, "Yep." Editing, directing is always a blast, and it's obviously a lot more headaches. But editing is what actually. That's the last person that touches it before it goes out. So that's where all the control is. And that we've always talked about this, you can make a great TV show without a director, as long as you have a good editor. But if you don't have an editor, you can't make a great TV show, period. Because unless it's a live show and they're calling it live, it's got to be put together somehow.
What are the, like, you have done so many of the like risque comedies, but a lot of like really good comedies as well. And like, I look at like Empty Nest, and I look at like Greg the Bunny and Crash and Bernstein, even though it wasn't on for like a long time. And Caroline in the City, like, and also like Dave's World and Whose Line Is It Anyway? Like, very different. But like, how do you go about editing? What is the magic of editing to make those types of shows work? And of course, Matt, about you as well.
Yeah, they are all so completely different. When we did Larry Sanders Show, I was there from the beginning, and at the beginning it was more of a documentary style. Gary wanted it to look like it was just cameras, catching what was going on. But then he realized when we got into editing that, if the camera's swinging around from people trying to catch what they're doing, you don't get the punchline necessarily. And so we completely rethought the way it was being shot. The first one we shot, I think, didn't air till 4 or 5 in, because it took him a little while to get the rhythm of how he wanted it to happen. And it was a whole different, at the time it was a whole different style. It was fake backstage and handheld. The DP on it, Peter Smokler, who coincidentally shot Spinal Tap, kept trying to figure out how to shoot like the long hallway walks. And he was a big rollerblade guy, and he ended up putting on his rollerblades and having somebody pull him backwards while he was holding the camera. So
wow,
a lot of experimenting on that. And then things like Whose Line Is It? They shoot so many of those bits of, the improv things, and then narrow it down. So it's a completely different process. Whose Line Is It? It's basically, you've got 100 great pieces. You got to narrow down to 50 fabulous pieces. And with Larry Sanders, it's are the shots in the right place for this? And the gags working. That was, they're just completely, it's really fun to be able to bounce around between the two. I've done, huge specials. I did a bunch of things with the Grammys and the Altman Jazz Film, and so it's always it's a lot of fun to do all these different things.
One of the questions I had was about Crash and Bernstein and Greg the Bunny, because that sounds like it would be a very different experience trying to direct around puppets.
It is, and it's quite challenging and really enjoyable. First of all, I think I can say this without fear of contradiction. All puppeteers are insane. As soon as they put their puppet on, that's who you're talking to. It's hilarious. I've done some things with Brian Henson and the folks over there. And it is a real experience. They first of all, they're looking at a monitor to see what they're doing because they can't see, especially on Greg the Bunny, because it was supposed to be puppets in the real world. So they would be under the stage with a hole for their hand or things like that, not necessarily, right next to the actor. Crash and Bernstein, it was almost always, Tim was on what they call an Oz around for Frank Oz. It was like a creeper they use on a car, to get under a car. Okay. They'd be on one of those and have a little monitor arm on the side so they could see what they're doing. But yeah, you've got to coordinate not only what you normally do. The actor would need you to go here, sit here, do that, but you've got to work around a body laying in front of you or next to you or sometimes underneath you. Because some of the puppets would require a second person to do hands and things while the puppeteer's doing the mouth and the head. But Greg the Bunny is my greatest sadness because we were, again, a little too early. We didn't have all the channels out there. And we had, aside from the puppets, we had Eugene Levy and Seth Green and Sarah Silverman as our cast.
Amazing cast and great writing.
Yeah, it was fabulous. And Steve Levitan, of course, who went on, first created Just Shoot Me and went on to create Modern Family, who was incredible at dealing with the network and feeling their way, figuring out how to get around the things they didn't want us to do. But it was a wonderful director by the name of Mike Mitchell did the pilot. And Mike has gone on to do like Trolls and the Lego Movie and Shrek, all those kinds of things. But he had done a couple little puppet shorts is where they got him for that. And the only problem he had was he was a feature film director, and he wasn't used to television where the producer has final say versus the film where the director generally has final say. And he kept trying to figure out why they were changing his stuff after he had done it. I said, oh, no. Because you're not in charge now, Mike. That's why. And Steve, by the second episode, we talked and I helped out enough. He said, you really should be directing these. And so I did the third episode, and then somebody else did the fourth, and then they brought in, I'm going to space on his name. He did The Fabulous Baker Boys and 8 Mile, very famous director. Oscar winner. And so he and Steve had the same agent was what I heard. And then he saw the script and said, I want to do one of those. And they said, you're nuts. And he came down, and of course, being a feature director with huge budgets, the first day he was already 3 days behind, which I never understood. But then I did one. It was a lot of fun. So the puppets are a whole different world. And what's great about puppets is because, of course, it's not the real world. You're creating a world. You can do whatever you want. With Greg when he walks, he's almost waist high with Jimmy, but he's only a foot tall. Okay, yeah, that's we're going with that. Sure, let it whatever. It's our world. We can do what we want.
Right, suspend reality at that point.
Yeah, can puppets drink through a straw? Sure. Our prop guy says, yeah, I can make that work. Sure, puppets can drink through a straw. It was whatever you happen to want. So it was Greg the Bunny was really sad because it didn't get to go any farther, and it was such a brilliantly written show. And Crash was a blast too because it was Disney, so you had to deal in the kids' world and be a little clean and all that. But because it was a puppet, he could get away with things that real people couldn't in the Disney world, which was also nice.
Right. No, it's a shame that in this Netflix era that they're not bringing back something like Greg the Bunny.
Yeah,
and that kind of pushed those boundaries a little bit more.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's been a lot of those that were a lot of fun that didn't go anywhere, unfortunately.
Now, I think a lot of people out there would probably say, "Oh, editing a stand-up show would be extremely easy." I want to correct that. Like, what are the hardships of editing for stand-up?
Well, if you're shooting one show, it is fairly easy unless you're going for a certain time. But generally, we shoot 2 shows, sometimes more, and cutting between them is where it gets really tricky because they don't do everything exactly the same. They, on a music piece, at least you can use a click for the drummer to keep in time, and you can go between performances because the timing will be the same. But Rodney, of course, was all over the place. Things would come to him to say stuff, and you have to get from one I like this one when I did this better. The audience reacted better on this show, but I said it funnier here. So can we take the punchline from this one, but use the audience reaction from this one? And all these little things, and it's a challenge. It's really fun. Without a doubt, my favorite was Sam Kinison, which, as you said, your kids watch it, so we can't do too much of what Sam said. But he was absolutely brilliant. As a teenager, he'd been an evangelical preacher, Pentecostal preacher, and brought in a cassette of his preaching for us to hear. And it was the exact same guy, but doing Bible verse instead of the jokes. It was the same deliverance, the same vocal range. And in the middle of the first one, we did 2 with Sam. I think he only did 2 HBO specials. And the first one was the one that was absolutely brilliant, where he kind of broke out. And we started it with some of that preaching. But in the middle of it, he said, people say to me, Sam, can you go back? And he went right back into the preaching for a few minutes on stage, and then almost passed out because he put so much energy into it. But he was, the thing was great about Sam was whether you were religious or not, especially if you happen to be a very devout Christian and could be easily offended, you could get mad at Sam for saying the things, but he was not wrong. He knew the Bible inside, not because he had been a preacher.
Right.
He wouldn't say things that were wrong. He would point out things that didn't make sense. He would make fun of things. He would talk. He had a bit about Jesus. Jesus didn't have a wife because, after going out for dinner with a guy, come back for 3 days. She's there in the doorway waiting for him, and where have you been all weekend? That whole bit. Well, first of all, I was dead. One of the reasons that we know there's a God is because Sam got sober and he got killed by a drunk driver. And I said, I just know he got up to heaven and saw God and went, good one.
You have worked with the whole gamut. I mean, you've got Sam Kinison, who definitely has one type of delivery, and how to explain that type of delivery is difficult, but like a lot of shouting, a lot of power, a lot of just energy behind it. And then you get Stephen Wright.
Oh, he was amazing. I remember counting because he could get a joke out, and I think it was as little as 11 words. And we were talking about it because he hadn't done that many, still hasn't done that many TV specials. And I said, why is that? And he said, because once the act is on TV, everybody knows it. So they expect new stuff. And to fill an hour, I have to write so much material that I don't want to throw it out on television and get away from it. The one that my wife and everybody's wife seemed to like the best is he said, I was laying in bed the other day with my girlfriend, and she said, if you could know how and when you were going to die, would you want to? And I said, no. And she said, okay, never mind. It's brilliant.
He had such amazing delivery.
Yeah.
He was just so monotone and so matter of fact about things, and that you were drawn in. And
coincidentally, a guest starred a number of times on Mad About You.
Right.
Yeah. As was another one of my favorite musicians, Lyle Lovett, who you may have noticed did the theme song for the reboot.
I did. I was wondering how that came about.
He and Paul are friends, and Paul, I wasn't aware at the time, but Paul, I don't know if he has a degree in music, but studied composition and music in college, was very, very much headed that direction before the stand-up. And so he actually wrote the theme song with Don Was. Helen had introduced him to Don at the beginning of the series. They were in an airport or whatever, and Paul said, we got to do a theme song. And Don said, well, let's get together and write it. So they wrote it. And then when I met Paul to do the reboot, I'd literally just come from Jim Keltner's house to the meeting, and he said, well, Jim played on our original theme song. You think he would do it again? I said, well, that's what he does. I'm sure he would. And so they got down there, and Jim said, I talked to him afterwards, he said that Lyle had his whole band there, and Lyle's drummer is Russ Kunkel, another legend. And Jim said, I wasn't going to get in the way of Russ, but he said, they just decided we should double drum. So they had 2 legends playing on that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was, but Paul would play piano on the set, just noodle around, and he was really, really good. And at one point I asked, he was playing something. I said, is that an original? And he said, well, yeah, I'm working on it with Michael McDonald. So, he's serious about that part. And he's quite good.
Yeah, he's amazing. Like that song is catchy, jazzy, and it really sets the mood for that show.
Yeah, and it's one of the few times where I've been on a show and I would actually, as I was editing, I would sit and listen to the theme song as it played back, because yeah, we know that one, skip over that shit.
And it's funny, like you can skip it on Netflix, you can also skip it on TV, like you can skip the intro, and I don't want to. I love listening to it when it comes up.
Yeah. It was a really nice song that he wrote. Mad About You it was really fun because I went back and watched some of the old shows, which I hadn't seen in so long, and Paul and Helen really fell right back into it. You would have guessed that they were married all those years, and the bits, because I've also was married quite a while like that as well. That things that really rang true to myself and things that they had, and a lot of the stuff Paul said came from he and his wife, who coincidentally is named Paul and Paula. And the one great argument they had in the show was he said he'd literally lifted from an evening with he and his wife, that they had this whole argument, and the last bit of it, which I appreciated, I know was from her, was as he's bringing it up yet again, she says, "I got to tell you, one of us does not survive this."
Wow. What a great line.
Yeah. And we also got the great treat of our final episode of that show. Our guest star playing Helen's mother was Carol Burnett.
Oh, I have not. See, I have gotten halfway through the new series. Have not finished it yet, but I absolutely love it because I love the original series. It was pretty much like the chorus to my college years. It was always on. Unfortunately, gave me a pretty different view of what marriage would be like. So luckily it's not anything like that. But I love these characters, and they've done a great job with bringing them back and just being exactly who they were before, but older and a little at times more experienced and mature, but also in many ways immature.
Exactly. As we all tend to be. The real odd thing that I found on there was Johnny Pankow, who plays Paul's cousin Ira. His brother is one of the original founding members of this band Chicago and wrote a lot of their hits, Jimmy Pankow.
Oh, really?
And of course, then we all know, it's one of those circle things. Oh, well, then so-and-so. Oh, of course we didn't. and Anne Ramsey, who plays Helen's sister, dated Ringo's stepdaughter.
Oh, wow.
It was that 6 degrees of separation becomes 1 degree all of a sudden.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask you was actually about Ringo Starr. Do you have any great stories about your time? I mean, you've worked with Ringo Starr for 16 plus years now.
Yeah, no stories.
No stories. What's he like? I'm a huge Beatles fan. Of course, I don't know many people probably that aren't, but
yeah. Well, I can tell you the best part is he is exactly like you would hope. He's hilarious. He's really fun to be around. He's a brilliant musician. But it's, if you've watched the movies, you watched Help Hard Day's Night, you've watched all that stuff, and you've seen the video clips and all, he is exactly that guy. And one of the things he told us early on was when they first came to America, because they'd already had all this hype in Europe, said the American press came down to bury him. He said they were basically there to make him look like idiots, and they started shouting all these questions at him. Ringo said, "Well, we just shouted back at him, and they loved us." It's the bit about, well, when are you going to get a haircut? Got one yesterday. All this stuff that that they were going to be the tough American press, and they weren't ready for the tough boys from Liverpool, and they just had a blast. And they ended up, when they played New York first, and they actually went from New York to Washington first on a train, and the press came along with them on the train. And he said the whole way there they were just bantering and having a great time. And he said by the time they got to Washington, the press was in love with them, and they could do no wrong. But it's really magical. It's probably been close to 20 years overall. It started with I shot some behind the scenes stuff. Mark Hudson from the Hudson Brothers put us together. Mark was a dear friend, and I've known him forever. And he was producing Ringo's albums at the time. And because I had video gear, Mark would always call me for favors. And I said, I never turned Mark down because I didn't know what it would be, but it would be weird. One time it was, "Hey, Brento, can you come in and direct me and Harry Nilsson in this little sketch?" "Sure, Mark." "Brento, can you meet me up at Cher's house and show her how to use the Avid?" "Sure, Mark." Just whatever it happens to be is going to be weird. And so it was, "Hey, Brent, I need you to shoot some interviews with Ringo for behind the scenes in this album." And I was actually doing Caroline at the time, and I said, "Well, I'm kind of in the middle of Caroline." I said, "Brent, it's Ringo." "Okay, yeah, I'll be there." I just wasn't thinking for a minute. And we had similar musical interests. That was the weird part. He's very much into country and rhythm and blues, big on country though. And after doing all this press stuff and things for this album, because from my news experience, I knew how to stay out of the way, but still get everything. And he liked that. And he said, why don't you come out on tour with us? BBC wanted to send 2 crews and all this. Just you and your camera. I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We'll take those big fancy buses. He says, no, take a jet. Well, that even sounds better. So yeah, we spent a couple months on the road and just having a lot of time to talk and sit. And because he gets to a venue and nothing to do, you sit in a hotel for an hour. He every now and then will go out, but it's not an easy thing. And then we got into talking about music and life in general, and we just hit it off. I'm a really good audience, and he's one of those people that needs an audience.
Well, you must have really caught on to him, and he must really like you, because look at the length of that relationship.
It's been very, very lucky. That's for certain.
Wow.
Now, you were telling me earlier that there's a story that you have about Weird Al.
So I gotta try and think of what year it would have been. This would have been early 90s. Let's go at 95, 96. I had, through weird sources, I met Judy Tenuta, did a special with her that actually became a Grammy-nominated comedy CD called Live and Unbutt-Plugged in Texas. Judy. So she said, I want to make this movie. I have this idea about an obsessive fan, and it'll be a fan of Weird Al, and me and Emo Phillips were going to write it. There was talk about she was either they had been married once, or she and Emo, or they were a couple. I'm not sure what it was. I didn't really get into that. But Judy wrote this crazy thing where she was going to come see Al after the show, and it was one of the first things I produced, which I realized I really hate producing, because directors and editors whine and producers get whined at, and I'm much better at whining than being whined at. So I don't produce anything anymore. So we did this shoot in this horrible little stage, no air conditioning. It was July. It was hot. It was the first day went from, say, 4 p.m. till almost 4 a.m. And I cannot say, I know people do this all the time, but I cannot say enough good things about Al, because it wasn't for him. It was Judy's idea. It was Judy's project. And he was there for everything, and he never complained, and was, would just go and kind of take a little nap. And as soon as you need him, he was there and on top of it. And at the end, she wanted to smash his face into a tub of concrete to get an imprint, and they did that. And, again,
wow.
never a complaint. And he just was so, so lovely. To this day, I couldn't think more highly of Al. And Judy was fabulous. It was all a lot of fun. And when Emo's not in front of an audience, he's just a guy. And as soon as somebody would come over and say, oh my God, Emo Phillips, like, oh, hi, how you doing? Wait, he just became a completely different person all of a sudden. It was strange. But the thing I remembered also was John McDuffie, who did the music for us. Was a great guitar player in LA here. Judy, I said, what do you want in the way of music? And she said, psycho accordion. And that was all she said. Like, okay. And I told John, and he came back with psycho accordion. God bless him. So it, worked out just right. And I think she entered it in some festivals or something. I don't really know what happened to it after that. It's out there, as is Judy.
Now, what was it called again?
It was just called The Fan.
The Fan. All right. So
Yeah.
it is out there somewhere. I will have to look that up.
If I find it, I'll send it to you.
That'd be excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I share that with the Weird Alphabet people?
No, not at all.
Oh, that'd be excellent. They will love that.
Yeah, it's funny how you just assume that people have seen all these things, and as we both know, there's way too many things out there for anybody to ever seen everything. But it was a lot of fun.
That sounds like a great time.
And a little side note, which I'm sure they know, but I wasn't aware of. We on the Ringo tour, one of the things that's great about the All-Star Band is that they have all these, basically they're all stars in their own right, and they don't play anybody's songs but theirs, and all of a sudden they've got to learn everybody else's songs, and a lot of them, all of them find it very exciting, because there's all of a sudden there's new music that they've got to get right, and they support each other. And the one tour we had Rick Derringer with us. It was Rick and Wally Palmer, and I think Edgar Winter and maybe Gary Wright. And I wasn't aware that Rick had produced Weird Al stuff in the beginning.
Right.
They had the same manager, I think, was what the connection was. And I think we were going to see Al, and Rick said, oh, you go back and say hi. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I produced this and that. And I go, well, okay, sure, that makes sense. As much sense as anything else out there.
speaking of music, getting us back to music again.
Look at you.
The music videos that you've done. Now, I haven't seen any of them listed, but what music videos have you directed?
Well, the one that was really good for me was the first one I did with Ringo, which was a song he wrote for George Harrison called Never Without You. And I was trying to figure out how to bring George into the song without being maudlin about it. And we set it up to look, the idea was it would be the stage where they shot the live section of Hard Day's Night 50 years later. It was old cameras. The theater was, falling down. It was black and white. Ringo's up there. And so what we did was I put George in the video of George in the monitors of the camera. So what you would see is Ringo playing, and then the camera would come by and you'd see a bit of George up there in the monitor to kind of tie them together.
Oh, wow.
Which was a lot of fun. But I didn't solely edit, but I was involved as an editor with all those early Aerosmith ones with Alicia Silverstone. And when Liv Tyler came in, those crazy ones. And, guys, those have been a while. Stevie Wonder video. I was a brand new editor at this big facility just doing fixes on the video. And of course, they have to test the new guys. So Stevie's guys were there and we need to do this, do that, change that, fix that. Okay. I said, are we good? They said, yeah, we just need Stevie to come in and approve it. And I said, okay. And of course they're laughing because Stevie can't see the video. I'm just, I'm trying to be the good editor. Okay. Whatever you people say, I'm there for you. Trying to think of there was for a while there, like in the late 80s, there were just like one after the other and after the other. It was a lot with Marty Callner, who is obviously a legendary director because of all that stuff. I'm guessing I think we did some Whitney Houston things, and I don't remember. There were too many long ago.
Do you remember the Ozzy Osbourne one?
Oh, that was actually later. Yeah, it was for a tribute album to John Lennon. Ozzy recorded John's song "How Can I Go Forward," and Ozzy. It's funny because it was after the series had been on MTV, and you saw the goofy drugged out dad or whatever. And when it came to music, he was just so there. He knew everything was going on. There was he was still a bit Ozzy, kind of funny and goofy, but he knew exactly what he wanted, where he wanted it to happen. Yeah, we got to change this, do that, fix that, do this. We shot him recording the whole song, which was really fun. But the thing I remember was that we did a little interview at the same time. And like so many of us of a certain age, he said, I just thank God that I was alive and walking the earth when the Beatles happened. Because it just, it meant
wow.
much to him and to all of us that actually saw that all happen. The thing that's hard for people who came after the Beatles broke up, was especially today because it's been so long, people don't realize that it happened within a 7-year time span.
Oh, yeah, it was so short. They put out this huge amount of albums and material.
Stones or Zeppelin or Aerosmith, it's been 40 years. It happened. It went from Love Me Do to A Day in the Life in 6 years. That was the growth in that time, which is, you think
phenomenal.
About it, mind-boggling. Yeah.
Like the amount of change that they do in the number of genres that they, in many ways, formulated and created in that short period of time from 63 to 70 is astounding.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is without compare. Obviously, it's. I always tell people that definitely the best thing about working with Ringo is hearing Beatles stories from a Beatle. we were in Liverpool one time for a show, and it was I think CBS morning show, and the woman had questions. There was an audience there and a whole bit, and she said, "Okay, which Beatle got the most girls?" And everybody started shouting, and Ringo said, "What are you shouting for? I was there." This isn't a vote.
You want an answer? Hello, the source.
I'll tell you what happened because I was there. Yeah, it does get to be funny from time to time, and you'll run into people that are the real Beatles nerds that know every little thing, and they'll want to challenge you because Ringo. Well, what happened on such and such date? I don't know. He doesn't know either. We had a great surprise. And I should remind you that he is turning 80 this summer.
Yeah.
10 years ago, we were at Radio City Music Hall on his birthday. And I had made this song video. another great blessing of working with Ringo is you do get to know the best musicians in the world. They're all friends of his, and they can come around. So you can't really buy the guy anything for his birthday. He's, can kind of buy you out with anything. And I called a friend in Nashville who's a big songwriter, got 15 number ones, Gary Burr. And I said, we're going to write a song for Ringo's birthday. He said, are we? I said, yeah. He said, well, who's going to sing it? I said, I'll call all the Ringo's friends. So we rewrote an old gunfighter ballad that Lauren Green did called Ringo, and told his life story in it. I, been in a couple thousand interviews with him. I've heard it so many times. So we had all of our lines and got all these people to sing it. And we, there was a bit about, when he's talking personally to you, he doesn't say the Beatles ever. He says the Lads, the Fabs. He just uses other terms. So we didn't say it, but we had a line about boy with rings upon his hand caught the ears of a cavern band. And the original line was, and John agreed with all the rest, from now on, Star is best. Cute little play on words, Pete Best. Right. And we had done a couple things through publicists with Paul McCartney. And so I got a hold of his assistant and said, hey, we got this line. Do you think Paul would want to do it in the song? So she asked us to send it over, and Paul said, sure, come on over to England. Of course, we changed it by then to Paul agreed with all the rest. And we had another one because Ringo, to this day, he still faults George Martin for having Andy White play on the single of Love Me Do, because they booked the session time. George did not know Ringo. He was worried. He brought in a session drummer for the first single, the only time that ever happened. And even when we saw George the last time all together, he was still giving him shit about it. So we had a line about the songs. Let's see. The songs were good. The lads were tight. No, the lads were good. The songs were tight, except the one with Andy White. And I said, if we could get George to do that for us, would be fabulous. So we got a hold of him. He said, absolutely. I said, well, we're coming to see Paul on such and such a date. He said, I'll be with Paul that morning. We'll just do it. So it all fell together. That was a long way getting around to. Then when we went to the birthday to do the party where we were going to play the video, Paul came to the concert, and unbeknownst to Ringo ahead of time, we got together with him and the band, and they learned Birthday. So Ringo's shows always end with Little Help from My Friends. Anybody known musically in the audience, he invites them up. And everybody was there, all the people from the past All-Stars, and Yoko was there, and they did a great big Little Help from My Friends, and it was great fun, and everybody ran off, and usually Ringo's gone up to the dressing room, and his wife Barbara was holding him on the side of the stage, and he's like, what's that? And then the guy started to walk back. I said, are they going to do another song? And from the other side, they brought out Paul's bass. It was at Radio City, and the place just went nuts. It was like Shea Stadium. It was just screams. And because they didn't want any of those other musicians getting up on his drum kit, his drum tech had taken the sticks away. So they started into the, boom, 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 and Ringo's like, oh my God. And he runs out and jumps up on his kit, and there's no sticks. And he waits for for Jeff Jonas, his drum tech, to hand him the sticks. And he starts playing. And people would say, this is a long way to getting around to the Beatle thing. Saying, well, he was looking at the other drummer to see how it went. Well, Ringo told me they played that song one time in the studio. It was a jam.
Right.
They didn't do a second take. They just played it, cut it up, put it together. So he'd never played it in 50 years. While the rest of us have all heard it 1,000 times. We play it all the time. And of course, Greg had played it many times at shows. So it was funny because, yes, he was watching Greg because he hadn't played it in 50 years. And you know what? We're not playing it in 50 years. He did pretty damn good.
Well, that's the thing. Like, yeah, he has had literally a storied career. There's almost no one out there that's had a longer career than he has that's still alive today. Yeah,
he's him and Charlie Watts are basically that, they're last men standing. It's amazing, but it was fun. It just seeing him and Paul together, it's what everybody wants to see, of course, these days. And afterwards, it was funny because Paul actually sat in the show the whole thing. He was in the back of the theater, regular seat. He said nobody bothered him. And wow. Yeah, and Ringo was shocked. And he said, and Paul said, no, I just, it would, if somebody would make a little motion, he would just, get a little shh and watch the show. And yeah, it was quite a time. I've been fortunate enough now to have been several times with them all together. And it's obvious, the love, and they're brothers. There's no other way to put it. As Ringo said, he felt bad for Elvis because he was alone. He said, we each had three brothers. When one of us got a little too far out of it, it's like, hey, they give us a little slap and bring us back to life. You're not so big. There's 4 of us here doing this. And he said that, I had 3 other people that knew what I was going through. Elvis had nobody.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is so they had, considering in their Hamburg years and stuff like that, about 10 years together. Mm-hmm. And in that 10 years, the bond that formed, they fought like brothers.
Yeah.
But they were brothers. That's a huge bond that continues to go forward.
Yeah. That was, he always said there were 4 people in the world that knew what we went through. And now there's 2.
Right.
Yeah, we actually were in Hamburg, I'm going to say 2-3 years ago, and I talked him into bringing Klaus Vormann down, and we walked the streets, the Reeperbahn, and where the clubs were, and all talked about all the, times because Klaus was there from that beginning point too, and I had not heard. I don't think Ringo had either. Klaus said, "Well, when Stu Sutcliffe left the band, so I asked John if I could play bass." And he said, "No, Paul's going to." Ringo said, "Oh, I didn't know that." Would have been a whole different thing again. It's the things that you just don't know about.
Right. So speaking of storied careers, you have had a storied career, and it's not over yet.
Not after this, maybe.
But I haven't asked you any of the stuff that one of the people that's a fan of the show has asked me. I'm like, I don't think I can ask some of that. Man, I don't want to get him kicked out of Hollywood. But my big question for you is, you just finished Mad About You. Hopefully there's a second season coming. Well, I don't know. Do they count it as a second season or as a season 12 at this point?
That's a good question. And I'll tell you right away, that was never planned. It was always supposed to be a 12-episode one-off thing, but the people at Spectrum were very happy with it. So anything's possible, but it was never planned for a second batch of these guys, even though I would love for that to happen as well.
Yeah, it'd be wonderful. But if that's not happening, what's coming up for you? What do you have on the horizon?
Well, one of the really good things about working with Ringo is there's always something else coming down the pike. And we've been, I put together, and it remains to be seen at what form it'll happen, but we've got the 30th anniversary of the All-Star Band, which happened actually last year. They started in 1989. And we've got all of the shows. I started with them in 2003, but up to that point, they'd shot every version of the band also. And I've got interviews with everybody. We've talked to a lot of people. I finally got Zach Starkey. I'm thrilled to say Zach was avoiding me. He doesn't like doing interviews, but he made the mistake of coming in for one of his dad's functions, and I cornered him. And he was one of the best once he got going. Ringo said he said Zach has the memory, so he remembers everything, and he remembered the set lists from '92.
Wow.
Yeah, and so Ringo had said, I said, "How do you want to lay this out?" I said, "Well, let's put everything out that we've got. So take one song from each artist from every band. And then, of course, we've got 12, 15 of his songs. Well, one song from every artist and his songs ends up in a 6.5-hour show.
Yeah.
There were 54 members of the All-Star Band over the years. And it was incredible going back through all that stuff. There was a band in, I'm going to say 97, Ringo called it the British Band. It was Gary Brooker, Jack Bruce, and Peter Frampton, and Mark Rivera on saxophone, who's not British, but we won't tell that. But when they played Denver, it just so happened that's where Ginger Baker lived at the time from Cream also. So Ginger came in and sat in on the kits during Jack Bruce's song. And when they finished doing White Room, which was a huge crashing ending, and Ginger just, banging the crap out of everything, they get up and give each other a hug, and Ringo says, "I guess we'll call that 2% Cream." There's always something that he's just so darn quick. We were at a press conference, and the woman asked a question, and she said, "Oh, my dad said to tell you you're the luckiest man in the world because you're married to Barbara Bach." And Ringo said, "Well, that must make your mom happy." That's why they got along with the press so well. They were so quick with the wit. It's a Liverpool thing. They're just so fast on that it's just amazing. But so yes, we have the 30th anniversary of the All-Star Band, and then we've also been working almost since I've been with Ringo on his documentary, the biography of all the stuff. Because he always said, people say, well, you're going to write a book? He said, they only care about those 7 years in the middle. He said, I got 2 books before that happened and I got 20 books after. But
exactly,
with the video and stuff and all the, obviously all the people that love him and the fans and stuff, there's so much stuff. We've basically been compiling and hopefully we'll get that into a documentary form at some point here soon, because he said to me one time, he said, you must know how much I trust you because you got 400 hours of my life on your shelf. And we got a lot of tape, I'll tell you.
Oh, that's going to be a long editing job.
Yeah. And it's fun because, you're sitting here watching either Ringo or great musicians talk about Ringo. There's worse ways to spend your time.
True.
But other than that, the pilots, you always wait and see what happens. There's a pilot I couldn't do myself, but I did last year, just now starting, called Outmatched with Jason Biggs from American Pie.
Yes.
Very funny show. He's got 3 kids the kids are all geniuses, and he and his wife are not.
That sounds promising.
Yeah. It's a very clever little show, and I just actually, before we started, I got called by ABC about another pilot that I don't know anything about. They just wanted to know if I'm available. So it's this sort of work is always you wait and see what happens next. One of my friends, great editor by the name of Pete Chakos, had done a couple of short runs on shows, and then he got on Big Bang Theory. Well, that worked out well for him.
Yeah, a little bit.
You never know which one's going to kick and which one's not going to keep going, and it's a lot like the music business. When you put out a record, it's going to sell. Oh, look, nobody bought it. We got to make another something.
Well, you brought us around full circle. Like, I didn't have to do any of the work on that, bringing us back to Big Bang Theory. So
I don't forgot what you told me. What does this pay?
Oh, yeah. About that. Let's talk about that after.
It's just like the music business.
You have been more than a gracious guest. You have been wonderful with your stories. You've answered a ton of questions. I really appreciate it. And you've been extremely entertaining. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for asking. It was a lot of fun. And who knows, maybe we'll do the reboot of the Barenaked Ladies show here this year.
I would love that. Please. And fates in heaven, make that happen.
It's so much easier.
Because it really was great storytelling. The acting was pretty good. Like, so they got some work to do, but they've also got years behind them now, so maybe a little bit better now that Ed's got his Ed's Up done. So
exactly.
But it's entertaining. I recommend everyone go out and watch it. It's a really well done pilot. I compare it to the Monkees. If you go back and watch the Monkees pilot, or even worse yet, the new Monkees pilot, this far outdoes either of those. I really can't explain why this was never picked up, other than it did push the envelope, and it really was the pre-cable days.
I think you're right.
And today, someone would pick it up.
Yeah, no doubt. They got so much they got to fill.
And I would love to see you on it because you did a great job with it. So, but thank you for coming on on our podcast and talking with me. I truly appreciate it. You've been wonderful.
You got it. Say hi to the Weird Al folks for me.
I definitely will. And when things start going on, if Mad About You or any other projects come up and you would like to have a shout out, let me know and I will shout it out to our group.
Absolutely will do.
Thank you so much.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, that was fun. Don't forget, no regrets, except maybe one.
To celebrate joining Pantheon Podcasts, Rock Camp, the podcast, the official podcast of Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, is giving away a guitar signed by Mike Portnoy of Dream Theater, Marty Friedman, formerly of Megadeth, and legendary shredder Zakk Wylde, plus our rockstar counselors like Vinny Appice, Monty Pittman, and more. To enter to win, simply follow, rate, and review our podcast on your preferred platform, and that's all you have to do. For more information, go to rockcamp.com/podcast.